I would like to welcome you all today to our 7th symposium on economic policy entitled The Economic Policy Agenda in Post-Conflict Transitions. This event is a joint event with the Economic Research Forum. This kind of collaboration has been ongoing for several years, and I hope that we will continue that. The IFE, the Institute of Financial Economics, was founded in 1984 thanks to the efforts of Dr. Maktasir and the generosity of 5 Lebanese banks, Saudi, BLF, Blom, Biblos, and the Crédit Libanais. We had launched the symposium series on economic policy last academic year, and this is our 7th event under this umbrella. This series focuses on discussing current national economic policies and their goals, evaluating recent policy interventions, as well as assessing their impacts on economic outcomes such as employment, output growth, inflation, etc. And as you can see, this event is being videotaped. It will be uploaded to YouTube by tomorrow and our Facebook page as well. There's a sign here showing our Facebook page. At this point, I will give the floor to Dr. Maktasir, who will present the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leila. In fact, I had prepared a few notes about the objective of this project and the objective of this workshop, which is part of a larger project. But then I decided that I will let it go to Ibrahim al-Badawi, who will do that. And I will simply say here that we're extremely happy that we've been able to get distinguished speakers to this panel, who include Ibrahim himself, Ibrahim al-Badawi, who is the Managing Director of ERF. And of course, this is not the first time he comes to EEB. This is perhaps, I don't know how many times, Ibrahim, but welcome back to the university. And then we are also very pleased to have Professor Raimundo Soto of the Catholic University of Chile, who will speak on the economic policy in the post-conflict transition. And then we're also very happy to have Ahmed Sheikh Abeid from ESQUA, who would take the Syrian case specifically. Our 2 discussants are well known to you. I introduce them. Yusuf Al-Khalil of EEB and the Bank of Lebanon, and Simon Naimi, Professor of Economics at EEB and a Fellow of the IFE. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask Ibrahim. Ibrahim, please, would you kindly give us your introductory remarks?
Okay, thank you, Leila. Thank you, Samir. It's really a great pleasure for me to be back in this very same meeting room at the AUB. And this time, I'll be participating in this event as a co-sponsor with the Institute for Financial Economics and the Economic Research Forum was established in 1993 as a network to support the building capacity or to build capacity for conducting rigorous development policy research in the Arab world and Iran and Turkey. And since it is an inception in 1993, the Economic Research Forum have always aspired to become at the forefront of development policy research and providing some sort of like a platform for researchers, especially young researchers, to conduct research and to cross-fertilize across the vast expanse of the region, across countries, and also internationally, as well as to use the research in order to promote evidence-based policy dialogue. At this moment, we have reached the 1,000 mark of the number of working papers that we produced since 1993. And we have published several books, and now we have a journal that has been producing 2 editions per year the Middle East Development Journal, and more recently we produced a policy portal called the Forum. And the main objective at this moment is to actually continue on capacity building, but also to focus much more on high-end research that would allow us to engage policymakers and to promote awareness about economic research and to enhance the quality of policymaking in the region. We have been focusing on the standard issues so far, such as, for example, the macroeconomics of natural resource management, issues such as labor market and growth and job creation issues, gender inequality and poverty, and labor market, broad labor market issues, and the like. Unfortunately, though, the fallout from the Arab Spring has made this region a conflictive region. And so development of the region now hinges very much on the capacity of the region to grow out of conflict and to make the transition from war to peace and to actually manage economies in the post-conflict. And because of this unfortunate development, we decided in the ERF to launch a major multi-year research theme on issues of causes of civil conflicts, transition from war to peace, and post-conflict development or post-conflict reconstruction. And we are fortunate enough to have a senior colleague of ours, Professor Samir Maghdisi, to lead this initiative together with a very distinguished group of researchers who have contributed thematic papers and will be providing support and advice to young researchers that we are recruiting from the 4 countries that are most affected by the conflicts, and these are Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yemen. And we took this because these are the countries that are most affected. But there are other countries also in the region who are suffering from one form or another of violence and terrorism and what have you. We will be holding this seminar is a precursor, which we thought will be a good precursor for us to exchange views and to get feedback from the participants in this seminar about arguably, one of the most important aspects of growing out of conflicts is actually how to fix the economies out of in the post-conflict and how to actually create economic conditions that will promote peace building. But next week we'll be starting a major workshop in Casablanca focused on building a sub-network from these 4 countries, researchers from these 4 countries to undertake case studies covering 3 important questions. Why these societies become conflictive? And second, what types of governance institutions that would be required in order to transit from conflict to peace, especially given the characteristics of this society as being either polarized societies or societies that are characterized by extreme kind of cleavages across identity, be sectarian, religious, or cultural identities. And then third is the subject of today, which is really the economic agenda for post-conflict. But then we are also going to go beyond that, thinking ahead to address other issues, such as, for example, the issue of refugees and the role of refugees in post-conflict development, repatriation of refugees. What are the political and economic conditions for successful repatriation, and what do we expect from the refugees as contributors to post-conflict development? And who are the refugees? What are the characteristics of the refugees, be in the neighboring countries or in Europe, for example? Then there is the issue of climate change and the potential impact of climate change on conflict in the future. There is also the issue of how the households have been affected by conflicts and how they cope with it. And this requires going micro, collecting data on the households in conflict, and seeing how they are being impacted and how they try to develop coping or augmenting mechanisms to it. So there is several issues that could be addressed in the context of, there is the issue of neighborhood. What are the strategies of the neighboring countries, especially major regional countries? How could they become a positive agents for promoting peace rather than a negative agents for fanning the flame of conflicts and division? This is an important issue that needs to be addressed because these regional countries, most notably non-Arab regional countries, have huge influence, unfortunately, on the fate of the conflictive Arab countries. But it's a reality. We have to deal with it, and we have to try to understand and to model it and see how we can develop some policy recommendations out of it. So the point is that actually at the ARF, this issue, this theme will be an important theme for research, and hopefully it will pay dividends in terms of enhancing the quality of the policy dialogue, and also perhaps maybe in a humble way could also contribute to better understanding in the societies that are conflictive in terms of the concerns and the insecurities of the various groups, and how we can actually create a governance structure and an economic program that can actually address legitimate concerns of the various segments of the societies in these conflictive countries. So I think, Mr. Chairman, I will stop here. And,
Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I'm going to give the floor to Raimondo now to give his first presentation on the economic policy in post-conflict transition. You want to use the...
No, that's not the... Okay, Samir, thank you very much. It is customary to say that I am really very grateful of being here and all that thing, but in this case, it's sincerely from the heart. This is a wonderful opportunity to... It's my first time in Lebanon. I've been here like 4 hours and a half, no more than that, and I already love the country. I don't know what happens, but I like it. So thank you very much for bringing me here. This is a very unique and different project in my entire career as an academic, because it deals with things that economists like myself, prone to econometrics and mathematics and the like, sort of never get to touch, and it's really fascinating. So I'm really glad that I could work with Samir Magdisi on this economic agenda for post-conflict reconstruction. The paper is very long. I do not intend to present everything that is in the paper. There's a lot of ideas around, and as I would say in a few minutes, this is a paper trying to be sort of a blueprint for the more applied country-specific work that is going to be done in the project. So it moves at a level of generality that would serve all the papers as a guideline, hopefully. So let me start by saying that our view is that most of the reconstruction of post-conflict economies, the record is not really very good. There are notable and very noticeable exceptions, but in general, the relapse to violence is a very common phenomenon, and at least in my part of the world, which is Latin America, there have been very long periods of conflict, peace, conflict, peace, conflict, peace in the countries that have been affected by this. And although there's no longer important conflicts going on, our experience is that enforcing peace and making peace a meaningful process for the entire society is not guaranteed, and it's very difficult to achieve. there is, of course, a very complex situation in political, economic, social, cultural, historical terms, and there is a lot of interrelations into this. So even though I would like to give the economist recipe for success, it'll be something like we need to look at political issues, we need to look at social issues, cultural issues, legal issues, and the like. So everything is interrelated, and economics is going to play a role, but it's not going to play the main part. So despite the fact that this is multicultural and multidisciplinary and it has multiple interrelations, economic reforms are going to play a crucial role in this because it will have to address from alleviating the needs of the population, which are pressing right after the conflict ends or in the transition to peace, to providing resources for reconstruction. And there is a trade-off very clear there, and we can say things in order to make that choice the best possible. Or from placating the political demands of different interest groups, which could be either inside or outside the country, with dealing with the resources provided from donors, the timing of those resources, etc. So internally and externally, we will be facing a lot of different political demands. So as Ibrahim said, this is part of what I think is a very ambitious project, and it has 3 legs. One leg is taking stock of what were the causes of violence, because if we don't understand the causes of violence and the roots of the problem, and I'm not trying to go back to the 1st century, but if we don't address this part, it's very unlikely that we will have a meaningful proposal out of the blue. Then there is a second issue which deals with the post-conflict political governance in these economies. And thirdly, and this is what this paper is all about, is what are the economic reforms that would support reconstruction and provide a path to sustained development and poverty alleviation and inequality reduction. So, as I said, this paper aims at providing a blueprint, a map, for the in-depth country size for Syria, Iraq, Libya, and Yemen. Of course, a blueprint just gives you a roadmap, but each of the papers and each of the countries will provide very different views and very complementary views between these 4 experiences. And we hope that out of this, it will come out a clearer way to deal with the post-conflict reconstruction. Now, we have 2 premises that we think are vital for success. One is that institutional reforms are crucial. Institutions on the political side, institutions on the economic side, institutions on the legal side, and the like. And these reforms should aim at changing, if needed, improving whatever is needed, or eliminating altogether those pre-war institutions that actually paved the road for the conflict. Unless we deal with that pre-war institutions, it's going to be very, very difficult to provide meaningful reforms on the institutional side, and furthermore, be able to convince the different groups of the need of changing those institutions. I'm going to go back in what comes to the institutional part. But institutions are not the only thing. The other thing that we think is crucial is that this reconstruction effort ought to focus on achieving wider economic inclusion and lesser inequality. And this is not only income inequality or wealth inequality, it has to do with horizontal inequality, vertical inequality, political inequality, and the like. So that it will generate employment opportunities that in turn will make legitimate and sustainable the reconstruction process. So throughout the paper, which as I said is very long, it's like 70 pages long, these two things, we try to make these two things be the guidance for our own paper. To what extent what we're saying help the institutional reforms that are needed? To what extent what we're proposing allows for wider economic inclusion, to lesser inequality, to make participation of the different groups in economic life legitimate and sustainable. Now, what is our starting point? And for an economic paper, this is going to look very institutional in the sense that our starting point is that nations fail when governments lose legitimacy. And failed states exhibit flawed institutions. And there is a direct connection between institutions that no longer are seen legitimate by the population and that serve an illegitimate goal and failed states. So in this world of failed states, and the notion of a failed state, you can find it in a fascinating book by Acemoglu and Robinson that came out a couple of years ago. You would have that the executive dominates the entire area of decision making, and that there are no debate, that the judiciary system ends up being a branch of the executive, so that the population don't go to the judiciary system for justice because of fear of being against the executive, or because they think it's not serving any purpose to the population, but only rather to the executive. The state bureaucracy becomes the executive arm of the executive power. And armed forces are often highly politicized. So this is kind of the institutional arena in which we find ourselves when we think of these failed states. It follows obviously that countries that are recovering from conflicts should strive to establish democratic governance if they are going to embark on genuinely inclusive reconstruction. Otherwise, they would never be able to cement the transition to a peaceful and sustainable national development. And at this point, if you look at the literature and you look at the things that have been written, a number of authors, well-distinguished ones, think that because of this diagnostics that is here, and because of the idiosyncratic elements in each country, each reconstruction process is a unique thing. And that there's nothing to learn from one country to the next, because all these interrelations of different elements and all these idiosyncratic conditions would make every single reconstruction process unique, and there's nothing to learn from that for another economy. This project takes the opposite view and recognizes that there may be unique features, political, economy, sociological, what have you, but that there are common things that all reconstruction processes should deal with, and if so, we can learn from one country to the other, and we can come up with meaningful proposals. And that is basically what the paper is trying to do, the project is trying to do, by putting together the four experiences and by trying to use a similar methodological approach for the analysis of the situation and for the proposals of reforms. So, from an economic point of view, reconstruction will have to deal with at least the following list of things there: the repatriation of human and financial resources, so migration and capital flows, dealing with the donor community, their policies, and I didn't put it in there, their timing of the inflow of money that is being given to this country by the donor community, that may or may not be aligned with the needs of the country at stage of development. It will have to deal with reverting the deterioration of human development and of security. And this is a very pressing need in a moment or in an instant in which the resources are extremely limited. Therefore, you need to use them in a very wise manner. Overcoming the destruction of infrastructure, which is quite obvious, and the thing that people from Latin America will only look at when thinking about civil wars or conflicts, because that's most likely what the news will show us. But infrastructure has a lot more dimensions than just simply a torn-down bridge or a non-functioning railroad station. It will also have to face the increase in the number of people needing social assistance and transfer from the government. The disabled, the elderly, the international or internally displaced, the war veterans, and all those groups legitimately will require support, social assistance, and therefore money from the rest of the society, be it in the form of the government or the private organizations. Coping with large fiscal deficits, because the war effort ends up being, most of the time, financed by running a and financing the deficit either with inflation, typically a result of the war, or an increase in the debt, either foreign or domestic, basically because the debt is not serviced during the wartime, or because they're accumulating and accumulating more debt. Normalizing external trade that is usually disrupted by hostilities, and internal trade that is affected even more during the conflict. So with this landscape of institutions on one hand and economic demands on the other, this project will try to address these demands from an economic point of view, but adding two dimensions, which are the political and the institutional points of view, in order to provide economically meaningful proposals. What was the starting point, if you want, for this project? If you look at the explanations for the economic side for the Arab Spring, it has been a long debate on what were the policies that were missing before the Arab Spring and that actually might have led to the revolts. If we look at the standard indicators for the decade before the Arab Spring in 2011, it wasn't really a very bad decade. It was kind of a nice decade from a macro point of view. And I, as a macroeconomist, I would look at the numbers and say, hey, this is not rosy, but it's not bad. GDP is growing, inflation is controlled, wages are rising, trade is booming, buildings are being built. If you look at the numbers, the very cold numbers, you would think, hey, these countries are not doing that bad. In fact, there is a paper by the World Bank in which they measure inequality prior to the Arab Spring, and the numbers are looking very good. Inequality was going down in an area where inequality is really not that high. So here, Gini coefficients, which measure the concentration of income, are around 0.4. In Latin America, they are around 0.55, and those are the highest in the world. So the most unequal area of the world is Latin America, and you guys in this neighborhood have the privilege of being much more equal than all Latin American economies. My country, which is the country in Latin America with good policies, is one of the most unequal of all countries in the world, with a 0.55 or 0.56 income distribution Gini. And not to mention the wealth distribution Gini, which is even worse. So as a macroeconomist trained on this, the situation was more or less okay, inequality was going down. Nevertheless, the same paper by the World Bank found that there is a worsening perception of inequality. The real inequality wasn't bad. The perception of inequality was worsening and was really bad. And a new paper by Martín Ravallón talks about it's not absolute inequality. What did the trick here is the notion of relative poverty. Is that in relative terms, we are not where we would like to be. Another perception thing. And it's associated with the rising perception of injustice, of low quality of public services and public goods compared to the rest of the world and not compared to the previous situation. It's not that we were doing better than last year, it's that we're not doing better than the other guys. And this is a very important difference. It doesn't matter the numbers. What matters is the perception vis-a-vis the situation. And that was worsening by all the indices that the World Bank has produced. And then there is this big issue of youth unemployment and the lack of outside options to violence. If it's not violence, then what? What do we do? What do I do? It's a 35% unemployment rate. What do I do? You recur to violence very easy. So unemployment, and particularly youth unemployment, poses a major challenge for the reconstruction and coping with this unemployment is essential for the future democratic development. Now, this is a very complicated issue anywhere, not only here. Youth unemployment is becoming an issue everywhere, and in every single labor market, you will find it with different names. You have this segment of the population that neither studies nor work. And they are in a limbo there. We don't know exactly what's going on. In the Chilean case, it has become a huge problem in a labor market in which unemployment is never above 7%. But the unemployment for the youth, and I'm saying between 18 and 25, it's double digits, 20%, 25%. So it's a major issue. As an economist, we don't have any clue of what's going on with these guys. So here I think there may be something similar. Now, this other virtuous circle is another of the challenges that these countries have and that this project needs to address, is that unless you have sustained economic growth, you will not get stability. But if you have stability, this will reinforce economic growth because with stability, there is investment, there is confidence. So it's a virtuous circle of growing and getting stability, and with stability, you have more investment, more growth, more stability. But kickstarting that thing is not very simple. How do we start the process of growing and turning it into a tool for achieving stability? And one of the things that the project, again, with this idea of inclusion, stresses is the fact that the benefit of growth, the very many benefits of growth, should not only materialize in rising employment or increasing wages, but also in better access and better quality of goods and services, so that people, more than just being employed, feels that they are included in the growth process. So what does this idea have to do with economics? Well, most of the new literature on the causes of exclusion and inequality are aligned along the following idea, is that you generate institutions, and these institutions can be of two types. One type is an extractive institution, and the other one is an inclusive institution. Extractive institutions are those that actually exploit a segment of the population to the benefit of another group in the population. So, and this is my country. rent extraction is there. It's been throughout history, from the colonial rule with the Spaniards exploiting the natives to the 20th century, where groups of the population, particularly men, were exploiting other groups of the population, particularly women. Now that things are turning, but embedded, there are a lot of institutions that actually are rent extractive and not rent inclusive. So what we need is rent creation. Let us create wealth and let us allow people to actually benefit from the wealth creation. Of course, there are other factors here that are very, very important, and of which I'm not going to say much because I don't know about them. One is sectarianism, and the other one is ethnic polarization. And I understand these two are very important, but I'm not going to go into them because I really don't know very much. So the main goal of this post-conflict reconstruction would be to achieve a major shift, not in policies only, but in the ideology of development and in the operation of the political structure, in order to move away from all the institutions that shouldn't be there if you want to have an inclusive growth economy, towards what we think is important, which is the modernization or creation of a basic macro and macroeconomic institutional framework and policy framework, which is needed to create a viable economy. Wait. Yeah. So, the paper, and I invite you to take a look to it so that you can make us comment, has 5 areas of work. And one is understanding the main determinant of the conflicts. The second one is taking stock of the situation of the countries so that any proposal on reconstruction starts from a solid ground. We need basic information to say, look, based on this, the proposal is that. So one of these stepping stones would be that civil conflicts are usually the result of long-standing and deep-rooted institutional failures. So if we can identify these failures and propose changes from an institutional point of view on that, we will be on our way to success. And then the paper goes into a description of different macroeconomic policies and institutions, and then microeconomic policies and regulatory policies that are aiming at, 1, increasing growth, 2, increasing inclusiveness, 3, changing institutions that have been there from being rent extractive to be rent inclusive. I don't have much time. The chairman is about to kill me, but we go through a large number of, a significant number of policy ideas there, and we would be really very glad if you can make us comments on how to materialize some of those ideas. Thank you very much.
So, Raimundo, I maybe as an annex at some point, you should tell us what happened in Chile. Why is it you have been a successful country? Have you been? Can't you say that you are very unique in Latin America, or am I exaggerating?
Of course we're unique. Yeah. What do you think? We're not only unique, we're the best. No, we have been very successful in certain areas, like ensuring growth and reducing poverty. We've been very weak in terms of reducing inequality and inclusive policies. So if you look at the political and economic environment there, what you would see is satisfaction with a country that is OECD at this point, and lower upper income, whatever you want to call it, like $22,000 per capita, which is a lot of money. But with the feeling that we haven't done enough on transferring this wealth to the population in a more equal or a more just way. So, and this is very important, we achieved one part, thinking that the rest will come, and the rest didn't come. You have to have policies for that.
Thanks, Raimundo, very much. Ahmad, we have, Nabil is waiting to hear you. And I don't know what I don't know what you're going to say about Syria, but let's see. Let me just ask you a question. Is the assumption of what you are saying now, what you are proposing is going to be something irrespective of the kind of settlement that will take place in Syria? I mean, this is what should be the way the model should take place, irrespective of the settlement that's going to take place? I mean, just a question that occurred to my mind.
Actually, we are trying maybe because of the stagnation that it's taking place in the political process. We are trying to propose something that maybe can touch the most sensitive part of this conflict, which is the hardest hit communities and the affected people, including the displaced people internally and externally. So actually, what we're trying to propose, part of it actually, and how to exit from this deadlock actually, and to find a new prospect for those people, while going on with the political process as we perceive it, an inclusive political process to the conflict. It's up to you actually. I can manage it.
Shall we say 25 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Yusuf and Simon.
That's fine. That will be fine. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, you have to do something so that it shows.
Okay. Sure. Not yet? Oh, sorry?
That's well.
Okay. Maybe it needs an expert. Okay, this is still on show, right?
It's gone.
And now I will switch to other one.
Exactly. Takes a while. There you are.
Yeah, okay. Great. So, thank you very much, Dr. Samir, for inviting me to be in this distinguished panel and in front of such a distinguished audience. And also, I would like to thank you, the American University of Beirut and the Institute of Financial Economics and the Economic Research Forum for organizing this important and timely event. Actually, it has been it's always tricky actually to talk about one side of our one topic on the Syrian conflict because due to its complexity and the interlinkage between all the socio-economic and political issues. And we can't escape actually from being blamed when talking about one topic and leaving the other. First of all, actually, what I would like to do rapidly and manage according to the time I have, actually, I will just make an overview about our program in which we produce this work, and also go again later to explain about the context for economic post-conflict economic policy and our what we are reflections on that. Actually, UNESCO made a very good step early in the early year of the conflict in 2012 and established the National Agenda for the Future of Syria program as part of its promoting human development and democracy in the region. Actually, and this program served as a platform for dialogue among Syrian experts to discuss the future of their country. And we used to call this program as a program for Syria run by Syrian. Actually, this program included about 200 experts and 200 plus experts, included also about 2,000 stakeholders, all of them that analyze the causes of the conflict and then try to propose a policy alternative, strategic policy alternative for Syria, how to move it from the conflict toward its 2030 vision taking into account the sustainable development goals. Actually, the program kept actually monitoring or studying, analyzing the impact of the conflict. Every 2 years, we have almost a report actually that describes the impact of the conflict, socio-economic impact, and discuss the hot issues. And also, we published 2017 our strategic policy framework for Syria 2030. Now, actually, currently, what we're trying to update this framework, and also producing another report to spot the impact of the conflict up to the end of 2017, and then we do kind of policy gap analysis that explore the policy needed to move Syria from now until 2030. This is just a brief overview about our program. Getting into topic actually on the economic policy in post-conflict, we're trying to map actually the context for economic policy. And as we heard in the previous presentation, I mean, defining the baseline for our policy design is very important. And honestly, I would say that we spend the considerable time of our time and effort actually in just trying to spot and grasp the impact or the socio-economic impact of the conflict. The difficulty with the Syrian conflict is highly unpredictable and very rapid dynamic. And whenever we try to produce get a snapshot of what's going on, the next day we have something new, and we had also to update our figures and our analysis. So first of all, actually, what we try to estimate the decline in the gross domestic product. As we know, 2011, the Syrian government stopped actually publishing any official data on national accounts or whether other economic data. And so we had since then actually to try to estimate. And with the conflict getting more intense, we found it difficult actually to reach the field, and we try to go around and find alternative way actually to estimate the impact of the conflict. By the end of 2017, actually, or let's say 2016, the GDP lost about 57% of its level in 2010. Our projections see that in 2017 we've witnessed some kind of growth. So this loss became less in 2017 from what we calculated. And in 2010, actually, the government was putting the development plan and projecting a growth rate for the coming 5 years, which is now the conflict years, with a growth rate about 5%. If we go actually and project, if we project the growth rate or the GDP level of on 2017, starting from 2010, GDP was $61 billion, and it was supposed to reach almost $86 billion in 2017. But the conflict came and made this kind of decline on the economic scene landscape in Syria, and the GDP estimated in 2017 about 27 billion. The total differences in the loss happened over the conflict years. It's about $269 billion, which is a GDP loss. Actually, this is the macroeconomic loss of that caused by the conflict. Adding to that, actually, about our recent estimate on the physical capital destruction in Syria, that about $120 billion, and all these are in constant prices of 2010. The total cost of the conflict we estimated about $390 billion, and which is an astronomical figure, actually, beyond any kind of resources available, whether internally or externally. Our estimate actually for this physical capital depletion or destruction that happened in Syria, we see that major destruction happened in the housing sector that had about 17% of the destruction, and then followed by the mining, security, transport, and manufacturing. Actually, all the capital-intensive sector that are the sectors that witnessed the high level of this destruction. We see geographically actually that Aleppo and Damascus rural are the industrial hub for Syria, are the major affected areas. Totally, it's more than 50% of the physical capital destruction that took place in Syria. Actually, we have more detail on this that will be presented in the new report. For the public finance, we give here the figures in absolute terms, like our estimates, like the revenue went down from almost 14 billion in 2010 to 3 billion in 2017. And so having to expenditure, but in less term, which widened the deficit. Now the deficit used to be, comparing to the level of expenditure, $1.3 billion. In 2017, it's 0.7. And we see actually it's like seeing as much is less, but actually because now we're using figures in local currency and converting this into dollars. But according to GDP, the deficit increased from 2.3% to 4.7% in 2017. The same actually happened to all like public finance figures. And we witnessed also like a very rapid depreciation in the value of the local currency in the Syrian pound that lost about 90% of its value through the 7 years of the conflict. Inflation also with the consumer price index about 8-folds of its level in 2010. Actually, we see, looking at the figures of public finance as a relative to GDP, we find kind of stability in this ratio. And this is why I presented them here in the absolute term, because which means actually we have almost the same level of public servants actually still working in the government. So all this kind of like drop on public expenditure came on their account, where they were dropped into extreme poverty. For example, the average salary, it used to be about $670 in 2010. Now it's only about just it's a tenth of its level, about $70 a month. So all this, the relative indicator to the GDP gives a stability seen that is untrue and came at the expense of the level standard of living of the population. And so this happens for the trade. Export actually dropped from $11 billion to less than $1 billion through over 7 years of the conflict. Export dropped also, import dropped also, but with less level. And deepened, we had the trade deficit. It's becoming less actually, but just due to the contraction in the economic activity. As a social side, we have like about great loss actually in job, about 538,000 jobs per year were destroyed, which levied about 482,000 people to the added to the employment annually. And also we have like schooling, number of years of schooling reduced reduced to 5.1 in 2015, comparing to its level in 2003, and we had about 1.75 million children were out of school, and only 57% of the education facilities were functional in 2017. So we have also, in the social section, social sector specifically, we face kind of very extreme shortage of information. So what we try actually very hard to estimate about the impact, and some estimates mention that poverty has extreme increased up to 80% in 2017. Thus, actually, we found now the conflict has, in general, had deteriorated, make a great deterioration in the investment environment because of the capital destruction and also the loss of in the human capital, where because of the people who the displacement, people were killed, people went to seek refuge outside the country. Also sanctions, which was imposed in 2012 actually, was very hurtful to the Syrian economy in general and affected conversely to the intention that was imposed, affected the normal people, ordinary people, more than the elite that were put under sanction. Corruption was increased dramatically, and also we had exchange rate volatility, high inflation, and capital flight. This actually, in surviving firm of Syrian Arab Republic survey that done by the World Bank in 2007 showed that service interruption were the major problem. About 36.7% of the respondents assigned this as a first problem in doing business. Surprisingly, we see there was a high level of employment that reached about 60%. The respondent told that about 15.8% of the respondent told that the shortage of unemployment is a second major problem. And this is very surprising with high level of employment. And this comes actually because of the people were the displacement and because the conscription and or because of hiding from conscriptions. So in this actually, the optimal scene for post-conflict situation actually that the country have a kind of a good level of ODA to secure the post-conflict need and take off with reconstruction. However, nevertheless, actually, this is not the case in Syria due to the high level of polarization about the Syrian conflict. So the international community is not unified around the conflict. Even our estimate, even if we have a kind of peace political process and political settlement to the conflict, we don't expect that a high level or considerable level of official aid assistance will be mobilized to Syria. How about, let alone the opposite scenario, if the political process reached a deadlock and Syria had to deal with its own problem by its own without any external support. And basically, the major part, and especially if even the Syria's ally, are depending mainly on commodity, on oil. And oil prices recently went down and caused fiscal issues to them. So they don't have this kind of space or fiscal space to support the construction in Syria. Looking about what we call the post-conflict, actually, and this is kind of problematic, actually, to talk about post-conflict in this situation, because we are questioning whether we are in post-conflict or not. And Syria, actually, the conflict was very severe in some geography, and some areas faced less or a kind of violence. So we are not yet on this situation, but actually looking at the population in Syria that already I have mentioned in the beginning, actually, they are suffering from from the deadlock of the stagnation of the political process, and they're suffering a big extension, and now facing a dilemma that supporting recovery as being now supporting one party on the account of another, and also waiting for the political process is being like perpetuating the suffering of the people. So, I mean, the main exit that we are proposing here actually to look at the indigenous drivers for economic recovery. In post-conflict reconstruction, actually, we have to mobilize resources internally and externally. For the internal part, any country in post-conflict situation had to do it anyway. And for in the current Syrian situation, actually, it has very strong sectors that can can drive growth and achieve recovery. So what we are trying to propose a set of policies that can enhance actually this kind of these drivers. And we have a criteria on which sector to concentrate more. It's related to their impact on growth, and also to the unemployment, on its share on GDP, availability of resources, and its contribution to peace building. Looking actually, when studying the decline in GDP and historically the driver for growth in Syria, we propose that the same sectors that can play as indigenous drivers for economic recovery, that are the agriculture and construction and basic infrastructure, and also the social infrastructure related to schools and hospitals, and also the financial intermediation and the small and medium enterprises. For financial intermediation, however, actually, this sector is facing like severe sanctions from abroad, and in addition, plus the climate of fear. There are some areas that are not sanctioned, but companies and our business community fear to deal with it because fearing from being included in the sanctions. Basically, as we mentioned, like we saw in the previous presentation, actually, maintaining or taking off with to create sustainable and inclusive growth is kind of, a common goal for post-conflict country. Generating employment, remedy the existing severe socioeconomic horizontal and vertical inequalities. So. But achieving this, actually, facing some macroeconomic challenges related to the inflation and to the exchange rate volatility. So at the fiscal policy, we can actually, like, we have an issue. Yeah, I'm almost done. It's like exchange rate policy, actually, we have an issue like which is common actually in post-conflict countries. The diminishing tax base, and also the high expectation on the expenditure side. And that obviously, actually, what we do is just to expand the tax base and looking for alternative sources for tax. Yeah, sure. Actually, so this way, but what I would like to say, we have something called in fiscal policy, the killing assumption is the engine by which that we are transferring or transmitting the policy, the fiscal policy in the society is related to the revenue management and public expenditure management. So in Syria, actually, we have a deficit in like what you call it, macro fiscal analysis in doing fiscal projections in which our priority should be linked to, and also in like revenue, managing the sources of revenue and directed to the priority sectors. So there's several areas of, this is kind of institutional building that we saw in the previous presentation. It was very crucial in the fiscal sector. At the monetary sector, actually, we perceive that there's a need for central bank independence. Central bank in Syria is it's not just an executive arm for the government, and this is it needs the kind of independence to maintain stability. But there's another challenges like facing some trade-offs relating to controlling inflation while maintaining economic growth. So inflation, it remains, but we have to, but it will never go back rapidly to the pre-conflict level. So with the exchange rate regime, actually, that is proposed is related to, we perceive actually from reading the past experience that a big exchange rate regime with kind of flexibility within limits would serve actually stabilizing the economy and also using the limits or the margin to maintain the competitiveness in case like we have like price elasticity for export. We have an issue, for example, we built our assumptions that there is no external aid, but actually what we are proposing, the indigenous drivers for economic recovery can serve as a platform to channel aid into the country toward the national priorities, and which will make this aid more effective according to other econometric studies. So. Finally, actually, back to NAFTA program, actually, we dealt with post-conflict situation, and we perceive it as combined with two stages, it's peace building and state building. In peace building, we have to respond to more urgent needs related to relief and humanitarian work and building a legal framework, and also rehabilitating physical infrastructure and human development. So we have some quick responses in this area that need to be dealt with, and postponing other measure or radical reform to other to later stage, so when we can have the society more reconciliated and stable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yusuf, where are you? Yusuf and Simon, how long? 5 minutes would do, or do you want more?
Both each.
Huh?
Both or each?
That's okay.
5 to 6 minutes, Yusuf, because I have some people here I would like to ask a question.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm very thankful, of course, to the Institute and to the Economic Research Forum. And I'm so happy to be with all of you this evening. I have listened careful. I have learned a lot, really. Thank you so much. I have some comments. Again, for the Economic Research Forum, I'm so happy that this element of the environment and climate change is a solid element of analysis and hopefully policy proposals. In Syria is quite a telling example. You know, a year or 2 years before the war, Syria witnessed a very severe drought that made it that a very significant proportion of the population, of the rural population, migrated from their villages to the suburbs of Aleppo and to the suburbs of Damascus, into very miserable situation of tents and camps and what have you, that must have built a lot of frustration and perhaps has been one of the elements of frustration and contradictions that led to the very sad drama in Syria. So this is one point I would like to commend, if you wish, your attitude towards that. Second, we were speaking of Syria. I mean, when will it resolve? We don't know, if you wish. On what terms would it resolve? We don't know. What would be the appetite of donors? We don't know. What will be the international and regional context? We don't know. And, you know, time has told us about how cynical could be the international mood and the regional context as far as helping, you know, displaced and poor people is concerned. I like it as well, this neighborhood effect. And we have worked together so much from the neighborhood, and took it from you. I learned a lot. I mean, Lebanon is a very important neighbor of Syria's, and one telling. Of course, we always repeat that the toll of refugees or displaced from Syria to Lebanon is high, but I would like to remind us of one macroeconomic indicator. Ever since 2011, Lebanon has been witnessing very severe balance of payments deficit, which is a first, and definitely a first as far as such a long period of time is concerned. So yes, we are affected by Syria. So this is a neighborhood effect where, you know, our politics, our finances, our economics are so much affected. But also Lebanon could be a laboratory, or Lebanon's recent history could be a laboratory as far as expecting solutions and policies are concerned. When, with the Ta'if Accord, which was the end, if you wish, official date of the end of the war in Lebanon in 1990, there was an agreement, and it was the trend, I guess, not only in the Middle East, not only for Lebanon, but also in Africa. The theory was, why wouldn't we try to integrate the warring parties into the economy? That will occupy them. They will have a stake as far as peace and prosperity is concerned, and we would solve for the problem. It used to come under this umbrella of this title of the price to pay for peace, PPP, another kind of PPP. Unfortunately, as far as I can judge or I can see, this was not a success. It has transformed militia leaders into mainly entrepreneurs and people who have invested so much in the infrastructure. And all of us would know that it's, rent-seeking income from the infrastructure is easier to get than in any other sector. It's very difficult to control and audit infrastructural projects, especially into contexts of countries like ours. Instead of having, as far as Lebanon is concerned, instead of having a class which has put confessionalism behind it, no, it has used confessionalism to get more and more power and more access to resources, to infrastructure projects. So yes, they were more integrated in the economy, but not from a modern kind of integration and economic change, more of traditional, tribal, confessional, rent-seeking kind of integration. Syria and Lebanon has lots of similarities, unfortunately, when it comes to that. Addressing the institutional change in Syria, we speaking of the public sector, we speaking of the judicial system, we speaking of the military forces, as we did in Lebanon. But did we succeed in Lebanon into getting those three institutions away from the rent-seeking leaders and away from either the confessional or tribal or so it's not easy. It sounds good, of course. One would hope it will happen, but given the track record of Lebanon, given this laboratory kind of experience in Lebanon, this is not very, very promising. I like it very much in both papers, this aspect, the youth, and what are the youth, and what is happening to human capital, because this is where we should invest. I'm not going to take a lot more, one minute, or I promise, or 2 minutes. This institutional change, I don't know if I have my students here. I'm not very fond of this exogenous growth theory. I don't think that bringing in institutions would make efficient and long-lasting changes. We in Lebanon have been trying for so long, this Shihab, this period of the golden years of Lebanon. We had our institutions. They did not last much, really, or they did not achieve what they were supposed to. I'm more into the so-called endogenous growth theory, whereby it would be economic activity that would impose changes. The day where in Syria and Lebanon, in Iraq and other countries, gaining one's bread is out of solid economic activity, maybe into manufacturing, into services, maybe into agriculture, would be the day that where institutions would change. But as long as it will be clientelism which would assure your bread and butter on the table and the future of your children or the future of the youth, I don't see much benefits of stressing on building efficient institutions as if it would be parachuted to the system. Yes, investing into the youth, into human capital, investing into the private sector is very important. Not to say we need zero institutions, of course not, but I don't know if many of us are acquainted with this issue of development via shortages versus development via excesses, excess institutions, excess money, or what have you. So I'm also I'm adhering to this issue of developing via shortages rather than via surpluses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. First, I would like to thank both speakers for very enlightening and interesting presentations. Ahmed really gave us a good summary of the total cost of the Syrian conflict and proposed some post-conflict resolution. Raimondo also gave us a broader picture on how to deal with post-conflict issues. What I will do is basically add up some of my ideas on how to proceed forward now that the Syrian conflict has consumed most of the GDP of Syria and 6 years of armed conflict. I'll try to basically come up with some ideas as to how to move forward in post-conflict Syria. In my opinion, first and foremost, what's important is to support the establishment and the strengthening of domestic economic institutions in Syria. Yusuf touched a little bit on those issues. Have real institutions to achieve basically a sustainable growth and political freedom. When I talk about institutions, I mean really institutions that target macroeconomic stability. Central bank, monetary policy. Ahmed also touched on the independence of the central bank. Have a central bank that focuses not only on exchange rate inflation, but also be independent to achieve long-run growth. That being said, macroeconomic stabilization policies alone are not enough. You also need to look at the social aspect of the Syrian economy and focus on institutions to manage social conflict, social insurance. These are starting points to move forward in post-conflict Syria. This being achieved, we can always go back to democracy. Democracy needs to also be introduced. Whoever is in power post-conflict Syria will have to learn from the mistakes of the regime. What led to the conflict and how we can probably try to have more democracy, more institution, have more participation, focus on growth that is inclusive, have the Syrian population be part of post-conflict Syria. Now, at the external level, emphasis should be placed on nurturing economic freedom by providing direct support for social, human, and economic development programs that help the population. That also means opening up the Syrian market, supporting its entry to the WTO, for example, integrate within the Arab region and perhaps with Europe. Also enhancing the Syrian industry, the industrial sector, and a changing domestic and global environment, further integration of the Syrian economy. I mean, the outcome of the Syrian conflict has been more or less decided. Now, how to move forward is going to be a tricky question. What's important is to try to reinstate democratic values that would ensure in Syria, that would ensure the development of a political system with appropriate state capacities needed to ensure that policies are not anti-developmental and in the service of public interest. So the policies, whether economic or social, needs to be holistic, not focus only on the economic recovery, but also on the social aspect of the recovery. So any new paradigm for development should be holistic and look at both aspects, economic and social, with always in mind more democracy and more participation of the Syrian population. Now, policy tools such as economic openness of the Syrian economy, financial market liberalization, economic integration, and financial inclusion are also important points to be addressed in post-conflict Syria. And macroeconomic policies should not shy away from meeting the same objectives as social policy under this new development paradigm. Of similar importance comes the social policy that should go hand in hand with economic policy in the making to effect the transformation and ensure an inclusive economic growth. This would basically move away from the old Syrian policies of the minimalist welfare state to having social policy as a pillar for development and growth. The bottom line is, basically, these are some of my ideas which perhaps would complement what we've heard in the two presentations before. There is a lot that still needs to be done, and I will end it here so that we open up the floor for more participation from whoever is present. Thank you, Samir.
Thank you very much, Simon.